Far Cry New Dawn is an overpriced $40 DLC. Here's why. The story can be summarized in one word: mess. It literally is a gigantic mess that doesn't really seem to have any sort of structure whatsoever. The story kind of goes all over the place, and you never really build any sort of relationship with any of the characters within the game. Because of that, you kind of see characters come and go, and you have no idea where they came from, why are they here, and what exactly their point is of being part of this story. Whenever you have any dialogue with the characters themselves, they feel very cringy at times, and there were plenty of times where I was just like, you know, I'm very close to uninstalling this game because this just kind of goes too far. Basically, think Ubisoft's E3 press conferences, but then turns up just ever so slightly to make you feel like you're being treated like a 2-year-old child, and that's supposed to laugh at every cringy little thing that they preserve on your plate. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on going into just how much of a mess and how much I dislike the story, because it doesn't really make much sense. It's lacking everything that Far Cry 5 did good, in my opinion, in terms of story. The villains themselves are very lackluster, and don't even get me started on how lackluster the end boss fights were, because they were just simply, they didn't really have a good feel to it whatsoever. There were no mechanics, there was nothing to really dive into. If you remember Far Cry 3, where you had this big boss battle with all kinds of mechanics, and there were certain periods of times where you had to shoot the enemy that you were trying to take down, nothing like this. It didn't feel like a boss battle. It was just very lackluster. I don't want to spoil it for the sake of spoilers, but if you want to play this game for the story alone and want to know how Far Cry 5 continues on after the nukes go off, it's not really worth it. Personally, I'd say if you want to pick up this game for the story, just simply don't. Far Cry 5, in my opinion, was a much better game in terms of stories and especially villains. Having said that though, the gameplay is what you would expect from a Far Cry game. If you want to describe the gameplay the best, you have to say, hey, this is a Far Cry game. And I think plenty of you would then understand what to expect. There's hideouts, there's side missions, there's a whole host of things to do. You got your vehicles that you can now craft, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But in overall, I think that the gameplay of Far Cry, it's still fun. Some missions felt very unnecessary and very filler. You got those weird kind of missions again from Joseph Seed, where you kind of walk from A to B and kind of listen to his blabbing about, and I don't personally really, I didn't really enjoy it, but it's a bit of the weirdness from Far Cry, which kind of fits within the game. Personally, I didn't really feel much for it, because I kind of felt like we've already done this in Far Cry 5. We listened to Joseph Seed and his massive ramblings about basically nothing. I didn't really feel much for those kind of missions. However, there's definitely some missions in there which provide some good action. Some of them I expected a bit more of, like, big chase scene where you're supposed to be chased by everyone and you kind of see only a couple of enemies, and the soundtrack behind it doesn't really, gave that extra push that I would like a soundtrack to do. Quickly resulted into me just kind of turning it off, and since I was streaming, just kind of turn on song requests to see if the people in chat would provide for some better background music than the game would do. A lot of the times the music on the radio is not something for my personal taste, and the soundtrack in the background, my chat was really complaining a lot of the times that they found the music more annoying and awful rather than anything else. So I personally didn't pay too much attention. Personally, for me, soundtrack most of the time only becomes noticeable when it really kicks in and it's really there. I didn't really miss having the soundtrack in the background. That's probably tells you enough. Now, one of the new additions to Far Cry New Dawn is the whole crafting system. This is a system where you can basically craft your weapons instead of accumulating a certain amount of money and then purchasing that. You can get that by upgrading your base, and the way to upgrade your base is by getting ethanol, and the best way to get that really is by completing gang hideouts and also just completing missions in general. Personally, I felt that it was a cool idea that you could upgrade your base to certain levels. However, what you end up doing really is just kind of grind out the same hideout on level 3, so you can accumulate like 400 ethanol, and you do that like a couple of times, and you basically can have your entire base be at level 3 and just pretend like nothing has ever happened. Same thing kind of goes for the weapons. The way to kind of do that quickly is by doing the expeditions, which by the way are a very nice addition to the game. They allow you to kind of branch out of the main map that is basically the exact same of Far Cry 5, but kind of looks different because of their post-apocalyptic feel they're trying to go for. It's a lot more colorful, you know, a lot of pink is going on, so if you're someone that likes pink, this is the game for you, I suppose. It's a really nice way. I've played 2 of them. I don't know how much more there are, but I kind of, you know, I was kind of playing the same one over and over again in order to get the materials that you need in order to craft weapons. Because expeditions on level 3 are a really great way of doing that. Unfortunately though, there is 3 different levels to the same expedition, and it doesn't really change anything at all apart from the location where the package is that you have to pick up. Apart from that, that's really it. Like, if you have a leveled weapon, you can take down enemies relatively easily, especially if you are running around with like elite weapons, then it becomes even easier. As touching on elite weapons and like the higher tier weapons, they're all kind of the same. They don't really feel unique at all. The only thing that's really different about them is that they look different. There's some very cool designs in there, I have to say. But in terms of feel and in terms of like how much different the guns feel and how much different they actually are, there's very little difference in terms of sound and in terms of, you know, kick and everything really. So I don't really find that, you know, really worth to go for, apart from the fact that if you don't have the level of weapon to take down a certain level of enemy, you're going to be struggling a lot, so you really have to go for those upgrades. But from a, you know, gameplay enjoyment perspective, not really worth it in my opinion. And I guess that kind of also takes away the whole point of having the leveling system. You know, if weapons don't really change, then what's really the point, to be honest? But attachments is also a thing that was something that really kind of annoyed me, because you're not allowed to have your own choosing of attachments, which results into you having to deal with some very shitty scopes, for example. Personally, I love to have like a red dot sight and not some really weird scope that has a weird kind of FOV as well. Field of view, for those who don't know. And it was really annoying to use. I didn't really enjoy using that all too much, and it kind of made me want to either be able to take off the scope or just be able to pick my own like you had in Far Cry 5. So in a way, that was kind of a bit of a step back. I know why they're trying to do that, because, you know, the whole post-apocalyptic feel. I would have liked it a lot more if they really gave that freedom that a lot of people are looking for in a Far Cry game, or in any open world for that matter. Because of that, I feel that the crafting really lacks any depth, especially because in the vehicles section as well, vehicles don't really seem to have a purpose apart from going from point A to B. And they really don't serve a purpose anymore at all whenever you're able to airdrop everywhere and you can just simply wingsuit everywhere and you'll be fine. There was this one time when I was trying to take out a hideout with my helicopter, which resulted into it getting blown up by a homing missile right away. It didn't have any armor, I couldn't upgrade it or anything, so there really wasn't really much of a point in me using a helicopter to, like, you know, try to take things out. And before you ask, yes, it was indeed the elite version of a helicopter. What you end up with is something that feels a lot more like an overpriced $40 DLC rather than a brand new experience. It lacks in a lot of things, and a lot of things could have been fleshed out a lot more, which they simply weren't. This might be because it has been made in such a short period of time, and everything kind of just feels more thrown together rather than anything else. If you're someone that really enjoys Far Cry and who thinks that the gameplay of a Far Cry game is something that is fun to them, I still would recommend this game. However, I would really try to get this game for a bit cheaper than full price. $20 I think would be an acceptable price to pay for a game like this. Higher than that, I really wouldn't say like, hey, you know, go for it. This is really one of those discounts titles that you pick up and have a bit of fun with for a couple of hours, and then kind of just, you know, forget about it until the next Far Cry comes out. But with all that said and done, let me know your thoughts about the game if you have played it in the comments down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and I'll see you all later.